SJ, welcome to Muskogee Radio, your weekly source for tribal and community news, interesting guests and discussions, plus a local events calendar. SJ, Stongo, Gary Fife, Jaho Jeff Giddos, Muskogee Radio, Mabo Hedjid Wetskis. Welcome to our program again this week. We are now seeing a change in the seasons finally. I think summer's going to hang on for another day or two, but they're talking about cooler weather and a change in climate here that will cool things off for our autumn season. So in preparation for that change, we've got a couple talk with tribal folks from our Department of Health about flu shots. There is, of course, the flu season coming up, which does affect a lot of people, and then what they're doing to deal with it. And then to begin our program, we will be speaking with a librarian with the OU Western History Collection about a fabulous collection of documents and materials online that they have there, including a lot of stuff about the Creek Nation. So might want to stick around for that. So let's get right into that library discussion. We are speaking with Ms. Lina Ortega. Are you with us there, ma'am?
I am.
Oh,
yes.
Okay, great. First time in 2 weeks our board here hasn't been kicking my tail and making me really sound ridiculous while I'm trying to make the darn thing work. So, so your voice is welcome there, believe me. First of all, you are with the University of Oklahoma Library in a specialized part of their operation there, right?
Yes, I'm the associate curator in OU's Western History Collection.
Now, can you give us an idea, first of all, what is the Western History Collection?
Well, as you mentioned, it's one of the specialized libraries within the OU library system. And it was founded in 1927 by one of the original history professors here at OU. His name was Professor Edward Everett Dell. And early on, he started collecting a lot of materials that had to do with the history of Oklahoma and the history of the American West, as well as Native American history. So we have pretty extensive collections that have been gathered over more than 90 years now by Professor Dell and all the subsequent curators here. So it really is an important historical resource for the history of the American West. And one of our strengths has to do with Native American history and culture, mostly for the tribes that are currently headquartered here in Oklahoma. Professor Dale pretty actively solicited collections that had to do with the tribes here, especially the 5 tribes. And then that has continued over the years, and we still take in collections all the time. We add materials on pretty much an everyday basis.
If you were to toss out a number, how many pieces are in this collection? I mean, a lot of it is online. I presume there are some books and things and maps and whatever. Do you have a number there? The size, I guess.
Yeah, it would be in the millions because we actually have quite a few formats here, and so for our photographs, there are more than 2 million images, and then our collections of papers or the manuscript collections, there's more than 2,000 collections. For our sound recordings, those would be in the hundreds. We have thousands of maps, many of which would be of interest to the Muskogee Nation. And then we have about 80,000 volumes of books and serial publications. So it's a pretty big collection. There's millions all total.
Gosh, yeah, I was kind of astounded there. I could feel my jaw drop when you said millions. I mean, gee.
Yes, yeah.
Since this is Muskogee Radio, let's focus there for a second. Now, would this collection include items that would reach as far back as the Trail of Tears?
A little bit. So the time period of most of the collections covers from the mid-19th century through well into the mid-20th century, even getting into the 1980s and 1990s. But as far as the Trail of Tears goes, we've got a little bit. And one of the online resources that I want to talk to you about today is the Indian Pioneer Papers. And some of those interviews touch upon the Trail of Tears or removal. And usually they're talking about their parents' recollections.
That is just amazing to think that there is this kind of resource available. Now, it sounds like then you have a lot of materials that would look at the establishment of the state of Oklahoma and, of course, Indian Territory, which preceded that. What kind of resource would you have in that kind of area?
So there are several maps. Some of them are mapping out when Oklahoma was divided into the Twin Territories. And so I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. There are some that deal with Indian Territory and with the Muskogee Creek's original lands from when they were removed here, as well as moving forward into time when they started, especially after the Civil War, started ceding additional lands here in Indian Territory for use by the other tribes that were starting to come in. And then after that, we get into maps that deal with both Oklahoma Territory and Indian Territory, and then there will be some maps that deal with allotment area for the Muskogee Creek Nation. So quite a few that would be dated from the early 20th century, like 1902, 1904, and so forth. I think the maps are a pretty underutilized resource, and I wish people would use them more to learn about history. And then the collections of papers will deal with Indian Territory and the nation's time here. So some of those are online. I want to say that the papers of I'm going to get into trouble here.
That's okay. I'll go down with you.
I'll come back to it a little bit later.
Okay. Well, being the nosy reporter that I am, we are quite interested in how the establishment of state, and then the period that you just described there was really a focus for the development of the oil industry, and a lot of names that are associated with the founding of Oklahoma and how it developed are involved in this period. So kind of give us an idea of what you've got there.
Oh, actually, that's another big strength of the Western history collections are those materials having to do with the oil industry. One of my favorite books here is a history of. The title of it is misleading because on the cover it just says History of Seminole. And my family is from Seminole, and so this caught my eye the first time I saw it. But it's actually a history that was compiled by the Indian Territory Illuminating Oil Company, which is one of the companies that was later acquired by Citgo. And so this is one of the early exploring companies here in Indian Territory in Oklahoma, and so that particular book is like a photograph history of Seminole during the heyday of oil exploration in the 20s. And so we have many other materials. We've got a lot of photographs. Some of them are showing like blowouts from an oil well. Those are very interesting. And then we've got a lot of records. Some of them are business records of of companies that operated here in Oklahoma and really contributed to the rise of the state. So one of those, a specific one, has to do with Charles Gould, who was one of the early geology professors here, and he also founded the Oklahoma Geological Survey. And so he was responsible for surveying a lot of the state. And so we have his papers as well as a collection of the Oklahoma Geological Survey. So those are a pretty important resource for the history of energy in Oklahoma.
Many of the images and movies and things about that particular period have the blowouts, as you mentioned. I think the movie Tulsa, is it, that where practically the whole oil field blew up, and then others, like the story of the FBI, where many of the Osage people were being brutalized and murdered for their oil resources. It was not a particularly bright period for many Native American people. Now, for someone who was wanting to understand that or develop whatever project they were working on, would your collection include some of the darker side of that period?
I believe so. We certainly do for the Osage, and I think for the Muskogee Creek and the Seminole Nations, it's worth farther research and exploration. Just this last summer, we had a movie researcher from the production company that's going to be making the feature film of the Flowers or Killers of the Flower Moon. So the book about the Osage oil murders that's so popular in the last couple of years. And she went through about 700 of our photographs just doing research for the film to get the sets right, to get the costumes right. And so both that research and then some other times when we've assisted researchers who have come here, I think it bears further exploration of the impact of the oil industry on the Muskogee Creek and the Seminole Nations. I know we have some books that talk about some of the early wells, and it was interesting to see, my family on the Seminole side had a couple of big wells in the 20s, and had some wells that came in all of a sudden, and then it didn't last very long. And one of the collections that we have here is the Walker Grisso collection, and he's kind of a common name in Seminole. And so those are just a couple of tiny examples of the resources that are here that I think could really inform Native Americans about the impacts of the oil industry on our people.
Wow, it's amazing. Now, I understand this digital library there. It covers the period now from about 1861, is it, to 1936? Is that kind of the time frame there?
Yeah, thereabouts. So we have multiple digital collections, and I think what you're referring to is the Indian Pioneer Papers.
Right.
And so, these were interviews that were done with Native Americans as well as non-Native early settlers to Oklahoma or to Indian Territory, and it was a Works Progress Administration project, so a WPA project in the late 1930s. And so most of the people that were interviewed were older, and so their memories reach back into the mid-19th century. And that's where some of those interviews that touch, more upon the Trail of Tears or removal are located. And this is an online resource that's freely accessible to anybody. The transcripts of these interviews are online.
And if someone wanted to find those, what's the address?
Yeah, so I always just tell people, just Google Indian Pioneer Papers
Okay.
and OU, and it's usually the first link that will show up. And then once you get into the site, you'll be able to search. There's a search box, and you'll be able to search across all of these interviews. And so one option for searching is to search by Muskogee Creek. And you also have to be kind of creative about your search terms and think about how people from the late 1930s would be describing things. Some of the terms that were commonly used then we may not use so much anymore, or they may even be objectionable to us now, but we still have to think for searching purposes of how people would have talked at that time. And so some of the Muskogee Creek, if I may, I'll talk about a couple of the interviews in the Indian Pioneer Papers about the Creek Nation.
No, please do.
Okay. So one of them is talking about school life for boys at the Wetumpka Mission. And in April of 1937, there were 3 men who were interviewed. One was named Saber Jackson. Another was Tingo Frank. Both of them were from Okemah. And then Coleman Bird from Faro, Oklahoma. And they're talking about school life there. And one of the quotes that really stood out to me in this interview was about how they weren't able to speak their native language. And I'm just going to read a couple of lines from it. It says, "The early day school teacher laid down the strict rule that the students should forget the native Indian language and learn and speak only the English. This was a difficult thing to do." And it goes on to talk about how sometimes students were selected to, they talk about how students policed the other students. And so some students were chosen somehow to kind of report on the others, I guess, if they were speaking in their native language, and then to also help decide what their punishment would be. And so I got to thinking, this is a terrible position to put these students in. What did they get out of it, or what punishment did they fear for not reporting on their other students? So this is just a glimpse of the history at the Wetumpka Mission from these men who were interviewed in the 1930s.
Now it makes me want to go ask my my language instructor about what's the Muskogee word for snitch.
Really?
Okay. Now you mentioned there was another story that you wanted to talk about.
So one of them is by Sardi Coe, whose parents, she described them as, or actually, I'm sorry, Sardi is a man, and he's talking about different things in his interview, but he's talking about his parents being Upper Muskogees. So he was actually born in 1853, so was born here in Indian Territory, but his parents were not, and he does touch upon that some in his interview. And likewise, there's an interview of a Susie Ross Martin, who was born in 1844, and her interview is actually a little bit longer. It's 15 pages, and she really goes into a lot of detail about her family history. It's pretty extensive, and so it's a gold mine of historical information, and of course, if you're related to them, really important for genealogy, too.
Who is coming there for this, to research this material? You mentioned a movie staff member, a researcher there, but who else is coming in to look this over? Oh,
it's everybody. We deal with quite a variety of researchers here. So, of course, a lot of them are students, whether they're graduate students or undergraduate students here at OU or from other schools. And it's the same situation for faculty members and other scholars like that. We have people who visit from all over Oklahoma, as well as people who visit from the nation, as well as some international researchers too. And then we also have a lot of authors or production companies, whether they're creating like a feature film movie or a documentary, who come and do research here. So it's quite a variety. And then we also have, and I think this has been growing more and more in recent years, we have a lot more tribal nations, whether it's their language department or cultural preservation department. You know, the tribes' names for these departments vary from nation to nation, but we have more and more researchers coming in from the tribes, which is very encouraging to me. One of the things that's very important to me personally is to make the tribal nations here in Oklahoma more aware of their materials that are here or that were written about them. And then we also have a lot of individuals that are coming in to do historical research. Sometimes they're genealogists. Sometimes they have wider interest in history. So it really is quite a variety. It's never boring here, and there's always something new to learn about.
The idea of tribal culture departments coming in is just wonderful. It just kind of lifts my spirits, you know. I don't know. I had a friend once who worked a lot in this area and said, you know, I'm always getting tired of Indians going to the white guys, the academics, to find out about their own culture.
Right.
And now the tribal members are coming themselves and picking this up and taking it back home. So that's got to make you feel pretty good, huh?
It does. It's really important to me, and I hope it continues to grow, that tribal members are writing our own histories. You know, we bring something to the table when we have our own cultural perspective and framework, coupled with the historical resources that, you know, it's got to make for a much better history, much more accurate and sympathetic history.
Let me shift gears here a little bit. Okay. I understand part of the resources available there have a lot to do with what we're doing right now. Radio programming, Indians for Indians Hour, is that correct? Tell me about that.
So I'll talk a little bit about what the radio show was to begin with, and then I'll talk about the projects I've been working on for a couple of years. So many of your listeners probably remember the Indians for Indians radio show. It was often referred to as Indians for Indians Hour, and it was broadcast from here at OU's WNAD AM radio station, starting in 1941, and it went through the early to mid-'70s. I actually don't know exactly when it stopped being broadcast from OU. So it was created by Don Whistler, who was chief of the Sac and Fox Nation, and he was an alumnus at OU, and Whistler and his family actually helped build many of the structures that are on OU's campus corner. So for those of your listeners who are familiar with OU, or maybe come here for game days or went to school here, I think that's a history that's been forgotten, is that there's a Native American connection to Campus Corner with the Sac and Fox family. But anyway, the radio show included participants from most of the tribes in Oklahoma, and there was no script, so Whistler would allow them to speak or to sing about whatever they wanted to. And so it was usually groups that came here to OU at their own expense and on their own time to participate on the radio show. After Whistler passed away in 1951, the Sequoia Indian Club, which was the student Native organization here on campus, took over sponsorship along with the help of their staff sponsor, Mr. Boyce Timmons, and they kept the show going for another 25 years.
Now, I recognize that name, Boyce Timmons. I'm not exactly sure where, but I remember hearing that. Let me ask you this. How much of this material was broadcast in native languages?
Quite a bit. So I always have to have the caveat of we don't have recordings for every broadcast. In fact, I would say we only have about 1/5 of the broadcasts that were recorded. But still, we have about 200 recordings. So it gives us a pretty good idea of what was on the show. And there is a lot of native language. Some tribes are much better represented than others. The Muskogee Creek is actually one of the tribes that's fairly well represented on the show recordings. So from 1944 through 1968, there were 8 of the broadcasts that were mostly Muskogee Creek. And some of the participants were Robert Buck, Joe Kennard, Joe Hicks, and they were generally doing stomp dance songs. And so they would be songs like a duck dance or a turkey dance, or one of them that kind of caught my eye was described as the old-fashioned or the old man dance. And so there's also some gar dances and some ball game songs.
That's pretty amazing. It sounds like I'm going to have to come pay you a visit there, I think, and sit down and listen to some of this stuff. Do you think any of those guys were sneaking something past the white man there?
Well, Don Whistler was really explicit that the show was, it was done by Indians and it was for Indians. And so the audience in its heyday was estimated to be around 75,000 listeners, which is really impressive. And also keep in mind, this is also the heyday of radio in general. But it's very much a vehicle for Native self-expression. I don't think that they felt, constrained or that the participants felt like they were performing for a non-Native audience. They were performing very much for their families and their tribes and other Native Americans. And I think the radio show had a lot to do with the rise of intertribal life during the 20th century. So a lot of the Muskogee language materials or broadcasts are more the church groups that came and participated. And so one of them was the Salt Creek Methodist Church out of Holdenville. One of them was Reverend John Berryhill from Chaska Methodist Church, I guess near Bristow. And then another broadcast, I'm not sure if it's more Creek or more Seminole. We don't have the church name, but it's a Reverend Bud Little. And so during all these broadcasts, there's a lot of, it is mostly praying or reciting scripture or singing hymns in the Creek language. And, they're really quite moving. They're evocative of being in church, and you can tell that the participants are really engaged in what they're doing. They're giving it all as they're singing for this radio audience.
Now, the church has always been such an important part of Muskogee culture.
Yeah.
People go one way, and maybe to the arbors and the stomp grounds, and others go another way to the churches. Mm-hmm. With the collection sounds fascinating. Now, we've got a minute or two left here. Okay. How would someone contact you to obtain more information or access this collection?
The collection will be available online starting in the middle part of November. We got a grant last year to digitize the recordings, and almost all of the recordings are going to be available online starting on November 14th, which is also the opening of an exhibit that is focused on Indians for Indians hour radio show that's going to be in Bizzell Memorial Library. And so I will be, or the OU libraries will be issuing a press release, I think next week or the week after, that has to deal with the exhibit. And then we'll also have some publicity about just the availability of the collection. And so I welcome everyone to come to the exhibit opening on November 14th, which is a Thursday. There's a reception at 2:30 in the afternoon, and then at 7 o'clock that evening, we're going to have a tribute performance with about 7 or 8 groups representing different tribes who are going to do a performance in tribute to the radio show. So I'm really looking forward to that. And if anyone wants to contact me directly, they're welcome to call at 405-325-3641 or email me at lortega@ou.edu.
All right, Lina Ortega, thank you so much. Wow, what a wealth of information is there. As I said, I'm going to have to find some time to come down there. And I had visions of a radio special forming in my head as we talked about this material. Anyway, okay, well, perhaps if you're up our way, let me know. We will want to cross trails in person, and we certainly will be talking to you again probably in November about this fascinating collection.
Oh, thank you.
All right, well, you have a good one. We appreciate your time today.
Okay, thank you so much. Mado.
Okay, we I'm going to take a short pause here, and then we'll be back with our health department people and talk about what we can expect for this upcoming flu season and how you can maybe fight it off before it gets to you. So please stay with us here on Muskogee Radio.
It's the oldest existing trophy to be awarded to any professional sports franchise. A new trophy is not made every year. It's one of a kind, and every team wants it. The Governor General of Canada purchased the decorative cup for around 50 cents in 1892. In 2019, the St. Louis Blues took home the Stanley Cup. Friday, October 11th, the coveted Stanley Cup is coming home to the Tulsa Oilers for one night. Join the Tulsa Oilers for a weekend of exciting hockey and your chance to see it up close and get your picture taken with the Stanley Cup.
Opening night, Friday, October 11th is Stanley Cup night. Game time is 7 when the Oilers take on the Kansas City Mavericks. Stick around after the game for the after party on the ice. Meet the players and get your picture with the Stanley Cup. Don't let the hockey excitement stop there. Come back on Saturday at 7 when Tulsa takes on the Allen Americans, and Sunday at 4 when Tulsa faces the Rapid City Rush. For ticket information, visit TulsaOilers.com. The Stanley Cup and a weekend of hockey. Does life get any better than that?
Welcome back to Muskogee Radio. Gary Fife, Joho Jifkados. Joining us this morning is Lauren Massey, who is an RN and public health nurse with our Department of Health, and Andra Peters, who is also an RN, but she's the director of the infection what? What was that again?
Infection control.
Thank you. Couldn't read my own scribble there for a second. Now, we are here at the beginning of autumn here in Oklahoma. It feels like summer still, and people are probably wondering when it's going to move and change and get on with it. But we need to start talking about a flu season here now. It seems like the parameters have changed with changes in the weather, whether some people want to believe it or not. We've got some changes to deal with. But flu season is already here. Your department is already experiencing patients coming in with it. First of all, let me ask you all to introduce yourselves real quick, or kind of a capsule, so we'll go from there. So we are talking about Ms. Peters first. Give us an idea of what you got.
Good morning. Yes, I just wanted to talk about the 2019-2020 influenza season. At the Department of Health this week, we've kicked off the employee flu vaccinations. So as we speak, we are out administering influenza vaccines. The season for flu officially starts October 1. It runs through, on paper, into March, but it can go on into April. We have had a few cases, so right now we are just at the low risk for our area. So we are gearing up, getting ready for our flu season.
Okay, and Lauren Massey, you're sort of the boots on the ground person, going out and dealing with the public.
Yes, so I'm a public health nurse, and there's a public health nurse at each of the clinics through Creek Nation, and we do the Department of Health mobile flu clinic tour, and those schedules are listed in numerous places, but ideally we go around covering most of Creek Nation's casinos, elderly nutritions, and the community centers to cover employees and the community 18 years and older. Or for those shots, if you have children, you have to bring those to the clinic, but we do have vaccines for children at the clinic. If you can't make it to our tour, you can go to any of the clinics, and if you are at your regular doctor visit, they'll give you a shot during that visit. If you just want to get a flu shot only, you just go to the patient registration and say you just want your flu shot, and they'll put you on with a nurse and get you your vaccine there too.
In the past, I think many people have been familiar with the big bus, blue bus that the department had a couple of years back, but this year that won't be the same vehicle, right?
Yes, we are in a white van,
Okay.
kind of like the transit vans that still have
Sure,
like the bus
yeah.
doors to open, but I'm allowed to drive it.
You don't need a CDL to do that.
No special license. So we will look a little different sitting outside the casinos. We'll have the van, and then we have a canopy to put up if we need some coverage for weather. So yeah, we're looking forward to that. And also this year, our HIV grant coordinator are going to be sitting with us, and they'll be doing some testing there too, just at a few sites. So if they are at the site, then that'll just be an extra service that people can get some testing there as well.
Now, your primary focus, of course, is serving the citizens of the Muskogee Creek Nation, which is your primary mission. But there will be chances for some other people to be assisted too. But as I say, that's not the primary focus, right?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, is there any cost for these vaccinations?
So nothing will be obviously rendered at the site. We might ask for insurance verification on some, but no one will be billed. Like you won't have a copay or anything like that. But if we're kind of attempting to get some possible reimbursement this year for the consent you signed says we'll document it in OSIS, but for the most part, no cost at the site. But if we do run an insurance, like it won't be, you won't be billed. You won't get a bill in the mail or anything like that for it.
That's the direction the department has been going for the last couple of years, and revenue is so important. I mean, you can't serve your folks if you can't pay for the tools you need.
Exactly, the vaccines.
Can either of you kind of give me an idea of how we're doing so far this year? I know it's just at the beginning of the season, which I'm proud to say that we're on top of it. But have you been seeing people showing up now at clinics or anywhere with these flu symptoms and problems?
We have seen some. It's very low right now, so as we're gearing up, trying to get everyone vaccinated. That's the number one way that you can protect yourself is getting the vaccination. So the symptoms of the flu are the typical respiratory symptoms, the coughing. Sometimes it comes on abruptly. So if you have symptoms that you wake up and feel sick, you can go in to the clinics and get tested. It's usually by a swab that we can test. Hand washing, of course, is very important during the flu season. Excuse me. When we're out in like the gyms, crowded areas, washing your hands is the second most important thing that you can do.
Now, I presume that cough right there was not a symptom.
Right.
No,
Lauren and I are both kind of dealing with these allergies. This wind kind of stirs up the...
Everything, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the kind of thing you mentioned, if you wake up and you feel bad, I mean, can it happen that quickly? I mean,
Yes.
I've been pretty lucky in the last few years, but...
Yes.
Yeah. The difference kind of to tell allergies versus flu are the body aches, a cough and a sore throat that kind of doesn't go away, and just fatigue, just extremely tired. And just that's all of a sudden. Like you slept last night, you woke up and your muscles ache and really just feel like you've been hit by a train. Like it's just fever. You can have a fever, but not everybody has a fever. And then kids could also have like more vomiting or diarrhea. That can be a sign in children sometimes too.
Now, before we go any further in that, how would you tell the flu difference from a common cold? I mean, the symptoms are so similar there. Is there something there, a flag that pops up that say, well, you're sicker than you think you are?
Usually with the flu, like Lauren said, you feel like a train wreck. You might also have a temperature. The only way to truly tell, though, is the swab, getting a result that is done by your provider in the clinic or the ER.
The flu doesn't observe any boundaries of age or sex or anything like that, does it? I mean, anyone can get it, right?
Right. The elderly have more complications, and also the pediatric or the young child is more prone to complications. So we highly recommend the flu vaccination, especially in those...
And pregnant women. And if you have asthma, diabetes, heart disease, any chronic condition that your immunity is broken down, you're at higher risk. And so what people don't think is that because you yourself have it, it's more important for the people in your household to get the flu vaccine. So if you have diabetes, everyone in your household, getting the flu vaccine protects you, because the more, if they don't carry it and don't get it, then you're not exposed to it as much. So the more people that get the vaccine, the better off everybody is community-wise, household-wise, with that. Also, once you get the flu shot, it takes 2 to 3 weeks for your body to build up that immunity to the shot. So just because you got the shot today doesn't mean you can't get exposed to the flu tomorrow and still get it. It takes those 2 to 3 weeks. So
no instant immunity.
Right. The earlier the better. That's why we recommend starting to get vaccinated now, because flu actually peaks in February.
Now, you are in the process, I believe, you said, of vaccinating your staff members.
Right.
Kind of get ahead of everything, have the providers and the responders in a position where they can deal with, families or larger numbers of people coming in who aren't coughing, right? About how many then are involved in that? Do you have numbers?
This week we have dates set up at each of our facilities. So we have approximately 20 staff members out administering the influenza vaccine. So Today, we have staff at our Coweta Clinic, at the Sapulpa Clinic, and at the Wetumpka Clinic. So each day this week, we are administering the flu vaccine to our employees.
Now, I remember a couple of years ago that it seemed like the nation got hit pretty hard by flu. And it was the rule when you went into a clinic, you had to wear a mask and things like that. Now, that was a pretty dire circumstances, and I presume that's not something that happens all the time, but it's there, and the possibilities are also there if people aren't being careful. At this point, as I said, it's early in the season. We're still feeling winter. We're still feeling summer here. And so has anyone made any predictions at all or have any feel for how the season will be? Are we going to get hit hard again, or are people pretty much getting prepared?
Since we're so early in the season, at this time we can't predict what the season will be.
Right.
We don't know if this virus is going to drift or change, so we're just preparing. And if you do go into the clinics or the hospital, we still have those stands up with the mask, the hand hygiene stations. So if you're coming in with a respiratory type symptom, it's best to put a mask on to protect the other patients.
Okay. They're going to be contact at home. I mean, if you're going to have a family member who is sick, then what kinds of things then maybe should a family observe or practice to keep this disease from spreading?
Again, get the vaccine and then wash your hands, get some alcohol foam or something to put on your hands to keep them clean. The flu virus is spread through the air, so when you cough or sneeze, that virus gets airborne. So don't touch your eyes, your nose, your mouth, any open area with your hands. That's a way that you can infect yourself with that virus.
What about things like door handles or
door handles? Anything that's touched can spread that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always a good idea to keep some type of disinfectant wipe and clean your door handles, your surfaces.
Mm-hmm. What about
frequently.
The gel that you can put on?
The gel is also good for hand hygiene.
Have the folks in your department really rallied to the cause, so to speak? Did they understand and bought into trying to prevent the spread of the flu this year?
Yes. Our employees are very good about cleaning their areas, wiping their phones down, performing hand hygiene. And last year, I want to give a shout out to one of our hospitals, the Creek Nation Community Hospital in Okemah. Our employees were vaccinated and met the Oklahoma Hospital Association percentage of 97%. The goal was set at 96%, and the employees there met that challenge. So this year,
well done.
all of our facilities are going for the 100%. So we'll get geared up, and our first line of defense is the vaccine. So we are getting that done this week so we can protect our patients and other employees and our families.
Now, let's take a minute or two to talk about the procedure and the vaccine itself. You know, I'm sure we've all seen, us in the lay community have seen TV stories about, people lining up and someone bares their shoulder and looks away, or some poor little child gets vaccinated, injected, and I remember doing that myself as a kid. But what all's involved now? Are we talking about, a harpoon? Are we talking about real fine Needles, I know there are some that are just like a hair, human hair practically. But
So the flu shot is, in my opinion, one of the, I don't want to say best to get, because nobody likes a needle stuck in their arm. Like, we'll just, say that. But it's no more than a little bee sting. You use one of the smallest needles, and the serum itself does not hurt on injection. Other vaccines are a little thicker, and they actually, can burn a little bit more on administration, but the flu vaccine is not. It's almost painless. Like, obviously it's a needle. The main thing with the flu is, to me, not the shot itself. It's the day or two after your arm gets a little sore. It can get a little red, a little warm to the touch. You can take over-the-counter relief. You can use an ice pack, just a warm shower. And the more you move it, the quicker it goes out. I got my shot yesterday, and my shoulder's just a little sore.
Right, I was going to ask you. I assume both of you now have sore arms. So the people who are, considering this procedure or undergoing it or even afraid of it really haven't gotten much to be afraid of, even though there are a lot of folks with, I can't even think of the word, who's terribly afraid of needles, hate needles and this kind of stuff. I've got friends who've done that.
Yeah.
I even got asked once when during a blood draw if I fainted.
Yes.
During that sort of thing.
A needle getting your blood drawn is a lot bigger than the needle for a flu injection.
Right. I remember my arm was sore. But there really isn't that much that people have to worry about. Just come in, bang, and it's done.
It's quite the opposite. You'll be amazed how many people line up to get their flu shot. Like in tons of communities, especially the elderly nutrition, they're so grateful and thankful that we come to them to save them a trip to the clinic. So our mobile flu, we have great turnout. People are very thankful, and we don't usually have any issues.
Oh, great. Now, let's take a second now to talk about that mobile clinic tour. You're going to be hitting pretty much most of the Creek Nation.
Yes, we have a lot of areas in Okmulgee since so many employees and citizens are in the Okmulgee area. But we go as far as Bristow, down to Holdenville, over to Okemah, up to Sapulpa, Coweta, pretty much cover it all. So I know that the flyer has gone around and it's posted, so those dates and times are on there.
For those folks who have not seen this yet, where can they find this information?
I know on Facebook, the PR put it on the Muskogee Creek Nation, Department of Health Facebook page. Any clinic has it posted up at some window. The hospital has it posted. It's mainly at all the clinics for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the elderly nutrition, the casinos can have it, and they might even put it on their social media.
I presume they can call your office and ask, when is this going to come to Duck Creek or something like that?
Yes, and if in doubt, you can call any of the main numbers at any clinic, and all the front people have the schedule in front of them as well.
All right. Andra, how are the Creek people responding to these things? I mean, are they endorsing it, becoming part of it, recognizing its value?
Our employees, yes, they are. We are striving to meet the 100% mark with becoming or getting the vaccination. So we've had a good response. We started yesterday in Okemah, and the employees were lining up, and of course there's still employees that become anxious when you say shot, but we're there with them and try to talk them through it, and before they know it, it's already done. So
right.
Medical people are the worst.
Nurses
and doctors are the worst.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. So it's sort of getting even with them, a little bit. Say, you're going to stab me in the arm? Well,
we have the same fear as anyone. So.
Speaking of fear, in past, I guess, decade or so, we've got the term is anti-vaxxers. People don't want vaccine of any kind or anything like that, and they say it causes this and that. And most of those studies they cite have been pretty well shot down and this kind of thing. But do you still have to deal with that? I mean, do you have to convince people or have situations where people just, lose control because they don't want to undergo the procedure?
We have, in the medical profession, we just try to show the education, show the studies, and talk people through it. So there's a lot of anti-vaxxer information out there, and it floats around, and we just have to address the questions as they come up.
Okay, now we saw the press release on how your hospitals are meeting the flu vaccine challenge. 100% is your goal?
Right.
All right.
This year it will be.
Let's shift gears one more time. Pink Party.
Pink Party. All right. That is our breast cancer awareness event, and it is the 17th annual, so it is nothing new to Creek Nation. It will be October 29th. At the Glenpool Conference Center. Lunch registration starts at 11:30. It is 11 o'clock for survivors only, survivors and their one person. So 11:30 for the general public. 12 o'clock is lunch, and the event is 1 to 3. We will be having a panelist of survivors on stage as part of our speakers, and also people from the St. Francis Oncology department speaking as well. You can register at Eventbrite, and you can just search Pink Party, and it's a dark black with the pink little butterfly emblem to click on.
Do you have anybody running in Tulsa over the weekend? The Pink Party, the run, Susan G. Coleman?
Oh, Susan B. I was actually going to run in that, but I did not train enough.
It's not an easy thing to do.
Yes. No, I don't know. Well, I know
Okay.
other friends were going to, but injuries stopped her from that one too. But no, that's a great cause. So if you do run, go out there and support that. That's a great cause too.
Giving Channel 6 a little plug there. Now, I understand the mobile clinic tour will begin pretty quickly here, and right here in Owobi, right?
Yes, complex. So employees, that's where we're going at the complex for some tribal employees. And then the One Fire Casino. So.
And that will be on the
October 7th.
Okay, so you'll be off and running after that. All right, now if anyone has any questions about anything, location costs, when you're going to be there, I presume you have to show some ID or something like that. I don't know. If they want to find out that kind of material and things, how do they get in touch with you?
We do have an email on the bottom of the flyer. It's phn@creekhealth.org. And typing that in, it'll default to email to all of the public health nurses, so it's not just one person, so you can get a faster response. So you can email phn@creekhealth.org, or you can call any of the clinics as well.
All right, we'd like to thank you all for coming in. Appreciate you making time to come share this information. Let's see now, that phone number one more time.
The email was phn@creekhealth.org.
All right, Lauren Massey and Audra Peters, thank you so much for being with us here today. We appreciate it, and good luck with your campaign.
Thank you.
Something we can do for you, let me know. We'd be happy to do it. Okay, we have a couple of messages, notices, community events coming up. We'll share with you real quick in the last minute or so. First of all, honoring Everyday Heroes, the 13th annual OMNIC Fall Festival. Scheduled events begins on October the 25th with events also following on the Saturday, with even a parade in downtown Okemah. So if you're interested, check them out. Including all events will take place except for a parade and mush ball. So you might want to check for those folks there. Etsy has opportunities for artists and things like that. Friday, October 11th. at the Tribal Housing Building and Raven Care Package Project, college kids needing care packages. If you're interested, get a hold of them at Youth Services, 549-2557. Okay, that's all I can do. Mado Mabu Hedget Scott, Gary Fife, Jawa Jeffkadas, saying thank you so much for listening with us, and we'll be back again next week. You've been listening to Muskogee Radio. Join us again next week for more local, tribal, and community news and updates. Mado.